Welcome to Project Management Beyond Task Management. Hi, I'm Nicole Chamblin, your trainer and productivity coach. I'm an ICF credentialed coach and the author of The Full Plate Detox, the time starved Shiro's guide for getting back to the top of her priority list guilt free. I began my professional life working in New York City marketing and advertising agencies many years ago before transitioning to training others to be more organized and productive. I learned the importance of staying on top of your work and your projects working in that advertising industry and developed the skill set of helping others become more productive themselves. My clients today would tell you that I am a procrastination proof coach because I am known to give them powerful yet loving kicks in the behind when they start slacking on their goals. So I am your girl when you are frustrated, exhausted, and tired of running on that hamster wheel because I'll get you from being busy and overwhelmed to productive and giving from your overflow. So, in this session, I'm going to share with you some of the insights that I have learned from project management that have allowed me to move beyond just task management. As I shared with you, I started in advertising industry, and that was an industry driven by deadlines. But if you didn't look at your projects from a top down overall view, you were bound to make mistakes, and mistakes in that industry really cost money. It can be really easy for you in your day to day to get caught up in busyness and the pressures of deadlines and demands. And if you're not focusing on the right thing, it will and can distract you from your work. So, I will be sharing with you the framework that's grounded in project management methodology. Now, don't worry, I'm not trying to turn you into a project manager. I certainly am not one myself. I don't have a PMP, full disclosure, but I do want to help you get to be more productive in how you look at your work, right? I don't want you to just chase deadlines and chase the clock. I want you to take a more complete approach to how you plan your work and how you use your resources and how you follow up on your deliverables. So let's get started. Let's talk about the difference between a task and a project, right? Because they're two different things, they're related. So a task is a single thing that you can do in just one session, right? And so it might be something like creating a checklist, for example. Tasks are a part of the work that has to be done. Yes, they have deadlines. They're part of a goal or a project, as I said. It can be an assignment, a duty, or a job that you're given. Now, projects are bigger, they're more complex. A project is singular in that it has a focus and an effort, but it should not be confused with a task. When I say singular, yes, a project typically is a one time effort, but it's bigger because it has multiple tasks involved. Projects are more temporary in an effort because you're creating a unique product, a service, or a result. There's usually a beginning and an end date, right? A start and an end date where you know that the project is being launched and when the project has a deadline to be completed. One of the most important things about a project is that it has established boundaries or scope about what your deliverable is supposed to be. So it ends up with you being really focused on one specific goal. Now, we can get stressed out when we're approaching a project if we think of it as just a series of tasks without looking at how all the integrated parts come into play. And so we can really create issues and problems if we're only focused on like one task behind another, right? We really need to start thinking about it as a larger, more overall effort, right? So I want you to start taking a step back when you're planning your work and thinking about it more from a project management perspective versus just looking at it as checking one task off your list. If you can make the shift to look at your project from, you look at your work from more of a project management view, what will happen is that it will start feeling more like um, when you are planning a project from the top down when you're looking at the top of a mountain and you're seeing all the highs and lows and the dips in the valley, right? So you're looking at your overall project, everything that's involved in this project. And then it's a more holistic view, if you will, of your work, right? Because you're going to be able to take in the full picture. Now, when you're working on things as if they're just a list of tasks, that's more like if you were standing at the bottom of a mountain and trying to look up and trying to imagine all of the other things that are coming. You're not going to be able to see them fully. You're just going to be able to focus on what's right in front of you. And so it's really important for you to think about your projects more holistically. And so, as I said, while I'm not a project manager, I learned the lesson of getting in the habit of thinking about my work through the lens of project management, right? And so I started to dig a little deeper so I could learn what I don't know. And I went to look at how do project managers, do what they do. And so the Project Management Institute actually has what's called a body of knowledge. And there are 10 different areas, right? And so it's an incredibly complex field. And my goal today is not to teach you project management in terms of what a project manager would know. There's far more complexity to it than I could ever cover in just, this short session. But I do want you to have a basic understanding of how project managers look at their work and look at running and managing a project from a holistic view and all the different things and components that are involved in it. Because if you can start adapting that mindset and thinking about your projects in that way, it will make you far more productive than if you were just looking at things as chasing one task or one deadline from the other. So let me first share with you the project process or the project life cycle, if you will. Every single project goes through this life cycle and process. And so hopefully you have already been doing some of this and you kind of understand the cycle of how this works, right? And so when you start out in the project initiation phase, this is where you answer the questions about your project, right? What do you want to achieve? This is where you kind of set those boundaries in place. And so this is a very important part of the process. And, you can't skip this. Unfortunately, I know folks try to jump from initiation and planning. They get a great idea and they want to get right into execution, but it's really important that you take the time to look at your project in this initiation phase, because this is where you pretty much are going to identify all of the key components. What is it that you want to accomplish, right? You're going to lay it out, essentially making the business case for why this project is necessary and important. Once you've completed the initiation phase, you move into the planning phase. And again, if you're not a planner, this is going to feel like pulling teeth, but it's really important to do this. This is where you kind of use your imagination and your vision to imagine what this project will be like when it's completed, and really look at what are the clear objectives that you want to set. What are the expectations that you want to set for this project? Try to identify benchmarks and milestones and key dates, if you can, that you want to hit. So you're really just now creating this roadmap and this flow for your project that you're going to use to measure your success by. When you're doing the initiation and the planning, you're trying to think of every possible thing that you may want, and so that can be challenging if you kind of don't know exactly what the outcome of this project is, if you've never done it before or worked on it before. So that's really important for you to have what I call subject matter experts in your back pocket to help you figure this out, right? But you want to do your homework and spend the time looking at what this project is ultimately going to become. Too often folks try to skip through initiation and planning, and that really creates issues. So whatever you're doing, don't skip the first two phases. It's really important to take the time in the initiation and planning phase before you jump into execution. And so one of the things I'll share with you in the swag bag is one of my favorite tools that I've used when I'm planning my projects, that at least gets me to think about what are the different phases and who are the different people that I have to have involved in it when I'm working on a project together. So I'll share that with you at the back end. But when you're doing this, it's important for you to go through initiation and planning. So once you've properly planned out your project, then you'll get to use those 10 knowledge areas that I talked about from the Project Management Institute. And I'm going to jump into those shortly, right? But those will come into play a lot, especially as you move into the execution phase. And so execution is where the work happens, right? When you start taking action. And so for some of you, this is what you've been waiting for. Like, I want to finally get to doing the project. And what this is really just bringing that plan to life, right? You're going to be looking at those milestones, those deadlines, those objectives that you set in the project planning phase, and you're just going to be working towards them. Now, in the execution phase, you're also going to be doing what we call monitoring and controlling. And monitoring and controlling is when you are tracking your projects, your progress with the project, checking off deadlines, checking off your timelines. And in this phase, there are three things that become super important, right? You're looking for your timeline. Are you, keeping to your schedule? You're watching out for scope creep, which is, your scope of your project is exactly what you say you want to accomplish. And you're trying to make sure that you don't deviate, that you don't all of a sudden add new bells and whistles that change the outcome of the project or change the timeline of the project. And the third thing you're looking for is costs, right? So you also want to manage your costs. One of the lessons I learned in advertising is that anytime you want to do something faster, it typically costs you more money. We were programmed and trained to stay away from those rush charges, right? And so if you want to do things faster, it'll cost you more money. If you change the scope or the deliverables of your project, it's going to cost you more money, right? And the other variable that you're looking at, right, which all these three things, scope, time, and cost, kind of circulate around, is quality. And we're going to talk about why that's important, right? So you're going to be looking for these things, monitoring and controlling your scope, your schedule, your costs, and your quality while you're in the execution phase. Once you've finally got your project done, right, and you've been able to do everything you need to do, check everything off of your list, um, most of us want to go run off and celebrate, but I want to encourage you to not skip the most important phase in my close in the last part of the project, which is closing it out, right? Closing it out is a process by which you're going to kind of look at everything that you've done and uh, bring the project to its true completion. And so one of the things I love to do in the closing out phase is creating an after action report for the project. And that's where you're going to capture your lessons learned. What went well, what didn't go well, what was different than you expected. If you were to do this project again, what would you do differently? What were the resources that you needed that you didn't have or that you had to bring into play? How well did you plan your time, your cost, your resources, any lessons learned from the project? Write them down and try to be as objective as you can. Keep it fact based. And when you do that, what happens is you can now use this as a tool when you're working on future projects. And it's super helpful, especially if you're working on a similar type of project. You can go back to this lessons learned that you created when the project was still fresh in your head and say, oh, wow, yeah, when I worked on that kind of project, I ran into a snag at this part. So let me plan for that and prepare for that in the coming project. So doing that after action report is super duper important because it will help you in future projects avoid mistakes and manage your costs. So it'll just continue to help you get better and better at the whole process. Now, this is just a snapshot overview of the project process. Again, like I said, there's so much more involved. You can dig in really deep into each of these stages, and there clearly, if you're working on it from a true project manager standpoint, you would have different documents that you would have to produce, et cetera. But from the simplest point, I just want you to think about your projects as you're running them from the initiation phase. How do you build your business case, planning out all of the resources and skill sets and things that you'll need as you move into execution, continuing to monitor the quality as well as the time, the cost, and the scope of the projects. And then before you close it out, make sure that you've captured any lessons learned so that you or someone else can benefit from that when you move forward. All right, so that's the project process and the life cycle. Now we're going to really look at the different aspects of a project that you want to keep in mind. And again, the goal here is to move you from just thinking about your tasks in a kind of monotone way. I would say, like when I use monotone, meaning like you're just kind of plotting one after the other. I want you to move from just task management and really think about how can you be um, take a more helicopter overall view of your projects. And so I want to introduce you to the project management body of knowledge areas, right? So the Project Management Institute has this guideline, if you will, that they publish um, called the body of knowledge, right? And so folks will call it PMBOK, right? Acronyms for everything. And so there are 10 different areas of the PMBOK. And, you can really spend your time, what you're going to do in terms of managing your project. You will incorporate all of these different areas throughout different stages of the life cycle. And so I want to just give you kind of a working knowledge of each of these areas. We're going to go in depth in each of these and kind of give you a couple of questions to ask yourself as you're moving through them, right? So let's dive in. In the very first stage, the integration stage, right? This is kind of the glue that holds your project together. So when you're in the integration stage of your project, you're really looking at the different elements of the project and what you'll need to pull together. So this is where your project plan development happens, your project plan execution happens, and what we call overall change control. So you're pulling all the pieces of the puzzle together and you're asking yourself, what resources will I need to make this project work? What subject matter experts will I need to make this project work? Funding, timeline, estimates. Will I have to go outside to get anything? So it really forces you when you're in this stage, in this knowledge area, to think about what you will need to pull this project off in the most successful way. And so this will prevent you from hitting a roadblock that you're, halfway through the project and there's a tool or a resource or a skill you need that you didn't plan on, that now you've got to press pause to go find and develop. And that's often one of the things that can challenge us in our projects, right? So that's not going to help us on our road to productivity if we're constantly pressing pause to go find something. And that's why it's so important for you to take the time up front and try to, think about all the different things that might come up and plan for them accordingly. So in the integration management area, this is what you would be doing. And again, as I said before, if you were I'm giving you the simplest aspect of this, but there's a lot more that you would be doing in this phase. And if you were in project management, you would know that you would have project charters and things of that nature. But for your projects, it's simply just about you really being as good as you can be about thinking about the different elements that you'll need to pull together for your project plan. The next area we'll talk about is scope management, right? So the scope management really defines what is the result that I'm chasing here, right? This is the boundary of your project. If your project was a piece of property, this is where you're going to mark out the lines of property. So you'll know if you go 1 inch further past that line, you're on someone else's property. So for your scope, you want to be able to clearly define your scope. Best practice or proven practice recommendation from me would be to make sure you're defining your scope as narrowly as you can to keep you specific. The broader the scope, the wider it gets, the more scope creep that you have, means that your project success is going to be harder to define. So you want to make sure that you're clearly defining the boundaries of your project, that you're taking into account all of the different things that have to be included in this project in order for it to be successful, right? And you want that really, really clear picture of what that project is going to be. If your goal is to create a triangle that has equal sides in the color red, right? That's what you would be writing in your scope. And so again, I'm just using a very simplistic way. But think about what you're trying to accomplish, get a very clear picture on what it will look like when it's done, and make sure that anyone that's going to be working with you or that has skin in the game, if you will, in the results, make sure that you're all on the same page about that deliverable. One of the big challenges I've seen is when folks are designing a product or service, and they fail to get the input from the right people, whether it's their customers, partners, or the folks that are going to end up using the product or the service in the end of the day. If you fail to get their input in the scope management process, then your end result is not going to meet their needs. And if they come on board while you're in developing process, they're going to look at it and say, oh no, that's not going to answer my need. I need it to do this as well as that, as well as that. And that's where we have what we call scope creep. And so we want to avoid that by taking the time up front to really try to get a clear idea on what our project is going to look like, to plan it out, to define it, to kind of have some, control mechanisms in place to prevent it from changing, and just kind of going and checking with the folks that are going to use it in the end and say, hey, how does this answer what you're looking for it to do? The next thing I want to talk to you about is schedule management. And so in schedule management, this is probably going to be the area that's in your comfort zone, right? You know that there are a ton of things that are going to be coming your way. And so this is where, you're probably going to say, yep, got this. It's one of the most important parts of your whole process, because when you're laying out your schedule, this is what's going to assure timely completion of your project. And so it's about identifying the different activities. You're looking at how do these activities have to be sequenced? Is there anything that is dependent on something else being completed before you can move forward? Do you have to time the resources that you'll need? And so for you, your resources could be anything from the specific tools that you'll need. It could be the people that are going to work on your project. It could be the money that you have to invest in a specific project. Do you have to share resources with other teams? So you really want to consider when your resources are going to be available, and if that availability is in line with the phase that you're going to be in when they're available. Because again, if you come to a specific point of your project, but the resource that you need isn't available, then that's going to put a pause in your schedule, right? And so you want to plan for that. These are the things that can impact our productivity when our resources are not available when we want them to be. So this is about scheduling them accordingly, making sure that you have enough time allocated on your schedule for each clearly defined task, and that the people who are going to be performing those tasks are aware of their responsibility and their timing. And so outline your tasks, put them in an order that makes sense, look at which ones might be dependent on the others, think about what sequences need to occur. What will your workflow look like from start to finish? Money talks and time is money. And so when it comes to cost management, you have to be good at managing that budget. How much money are you going to spend? Estimate as much as you need. What's the funding for each phase of your project? And try your best to stick to it. One of the things I'd also tell you to consider is, what is the value of the task that you're going to be doing at each phase versus the cost investment for it, right? And sometimes that cost investment could be the man hour or person hour cost for whoever's working on that task. For my small business and entrepreneur friends out there, one of the things that I'll always share to you is that, yes, you can do something yourself, but it might be more cost effective for you to delegate to someone else. And so I know there's sometimes a lot of hesitancy about bringing in teams, hiring a contractor, virtual assistant, or someone that you can delegate a task to. But when you're running your projects and when you start really looking at it from a cost management standpoint, one of the things that you'll realize is that you would never pay someone else your hourly rate to do certain tasks that you're holding on to. And so it would be better for you to delegate and hire out those specific tasks, whether to a subcontractor or if you get to the point that you need to hire an employee. If you're working in a professional environment and you are, especially if you're transitioning to a new role, this is also important for you. Think about if you're holding on to tasks that really should be delegated to someone else. When I worked in advertising, we were required to look at who performs certain aspects of the work because of billable hours. And so we would have to monitor, do we have someone with a higher billable hour doing something that really should be delegated down to someone who is, still learning and growing. So think about your costs, what you'll need for your resources, as well as how it relates to the people that you'll have working on those items. Quality management is super important. And so, as I said before, this is one of those things that you'll have to manage in order for your project to be successful, right? You want to look at, yes, is this project on time? You want to look at, is this project staying in budget? But ultimately, if the quality of your end product does not meet expectations, right? If it doesn't satisfy the needs that it was intended to do, then your project is for nothing. So quality management is about thinking about how you're going to measure the quality output of the project. What's that benchmark that will tell you that not only did I complete the project, but it's of the standard and quality that is going to meet the needs of the end user who will ultimately be using the product or service. So have that benchmark in place and just make it realistic. Sometimes I see folks, they set really high bars for the quality of their product, and they spend so much time chasing this really, really high perfectionist vision of what they want to achieve that they don't actually put anything out. And so if you're never actually releasing that project into the world, if you will, then all that time and energy you put into creating it or to make it perfect or to tweak it is actually wasted. So we don't want to do that either. But quality control and quality management is important. Oh, jumped ahead, sorry. The next area is resources management. And so this area used to be considered just human resources, but it's now called resources management. And it's really about making sure that you have a team and that you're making the most effective use of that team when it comes to the project, right? And so this looks at the resources management looks at how do you go about getting the right people on the team. In some cases, some organizations have to hire out, or you might, you might have to allocate a team member or a new staff or employee person to the team. So how do you make sure you got the right people, the right butts in the seat, if you will, right? So not only is it about putting the right person on the job, but it's about developing and managing that person, right? Managing that project team. So it's organizational planning, it's staff acquisition, it's team development. Think of it simply this way. How do you keep your team productive and happy? Even if you're the only person on that team, how do you make sure that the right people are doing the right things at the right time? So when you're thinking about your team, this could be your subject matter experts, your vendors, your customers, contractors, people that you're working with, your partners. It could be affiliates. Think about anyone that's going to help to support or deliver your project, right? In some cases, especially for my folks who are, as I said before, entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, it could be your family members, right? Who are folks that you need to keep happy while you're working on your business or growing your idea, because they'll have to give you understanding about why your time and your energy is going into a different area. But resources management here is about thinking about the people involved in your project. Now I will talk to you about communications, right? Communications in this vein, it's not just about, speaking to others involved. It's also about the proper collection and sharing or dissemination of project related information. So when you're thinking about communications planning, you got to think about, not just who I communicate with, but how am I going to communicate with them? What are the tools that I'm going to use to store and share information? What's going to be my distribution schedule, for example, for information? How often do I need to give updates? Who do I need to give updates to? Do I need to put the right messaging out so I can get people on board in the project? Do I have to basically market my project to anyone else? How do I keep the right people informed and engaged as the project is in development? So this is what communications management involves. Risk management. A lot of us want to run from risk, but we can't. Every project has an element of risk. And so the more complex and greater your project, the more complex and greater is your chance of risk. This is a challenging area because it's pretty much about trying to identify the things that could go wrong with your project and having a contingency or what if plan in place for that. So you're thinking about the different areas of risk, trying to identify them, trying to quantify them, and then coming up with what your response will be if that happens. So you're going to be asking yourself, all the different things that could go wrong. And when you do, just write them down and try to come up with a few things that you would do to control them. Now, I'm just going to kind of caution you not to let this take over so much that you talk yourself out of the project. Um, Things are going to come up, right? It could be resources unavailable. It could be a cost factor. There's going to be different things that come up. The idea here is that you just kind of say, what are the possible things that could come up? What will be my response or my reaction if they do? And then if things do happen, document them, write them down. What happened? What went wrong? What was the fly in the ointment, if you will? And what was the response? This is going to be good for you to keep with that after action report that I talked about in the project cycle, so that if things happen down the road and you do a similar project, you'll have this risk report, if you will, and you can look at what went wrong, and then you can include that in your project planning the next time. So that's why it's important to make sure you're keeping the right documents throughout the process. Okay, so procurement management is about getting goods and resources and services from outside your performing organization. I don't care if you're a one-person shop or a 1,000-person shop, at some point you're going to have to get goods and resources from someone else or another organization. So this is about planning for procurement. A mistake that I've seen happen in organizations is that folks who are planning the projects don't take the procurement process into account. So be very knowledgeable about how the procurement process for your organization affects your schedules. A lot of times procurement departments, or the procurement process, depending on how complex the project or how complex your organization is. If you're, solopreneur, you're going to have to think about, costs and your available money and funding, et cetera, to go out and hire these resources or buy these resources or softwares or tools or whatever. If you're in a large organization and you actually have a procurement or a contracting department, then get to know them, because oftentimes they're going to have regulations and legal guidelines around their procurement process that they have to follow and stay in compliance with in terms of solicitations and timing and planning, things like source selection and contract administration and contract closeout. And so those processes, if you're not taking them to account in your scheduling and your planning, can affect you. So get knowledgeable about things around the procurement process, things like requests for proposals and what they'll need. Even if you're a small business or a smaller company or micro business, you might need to hire a graphic designer, you might need to hire a virtual assistant, you might need to bring in some sort of outside team or resource to make your project more successful. So this is all part of the process. And the last area that I'm going to talk to you about is what we call stakeholder management. And so with stakeholder management, this is actually one of the newest areas of the PMBOK. And it's about dealing with how you manage the expectations of the project stakeholders. So you have to figure out, who are my stakeholders? Who are the people that have skin in the game? How do I plan managing their expectations? So basically, how do I talk to them? How do I find out what they expect? How do I control their expectations? Are these people in their head thinking that they're going to get a rocket ship when at the end of the day, all I'm going to give them is a two-seater commuter, jet or commuter plane, right? You have to be able to manage their expectations. So think about, who are the people who have influence, or who will be the end users of your project. And, it could be your customers, it could be internal employees, it could be senior staff. As I said before, it could even be your family, right? But what you have to get good at is figuring out what it is that they need, what are their expectations, what is the information that they need to get. And again, how do you keep them happy and make sure that at the end of the day, your project meets their needs, right? And so just want to recap the different areas of the project management process. You've got the life cycle, where you're going through initiation, planning, execution, monitoring and controlling, and closing out your project. And at any different point in this life cycle, you're going to be dealing with any of the 10 different project management areas, the body of knowledge areas. They kind of go hand in hand. When you get into the habit of looking at your project, like I said, from that mountain view down, top down, and thinking about each of these different areas as they could potentially affect your project, you're going to be more productive, because you're going to be more effective. If you take that time up front and you put that project plan in place, then you'll be able to move through your project schedule and your project execution in a much more smoother fashion than if you were just reacting to things as they come up. And so we don't want you to be reactive. We want you to be more proactive. Because the more proactive you are, the more productive you're going to be. So let me leave it to you like this. Think about, um, sometimes we are used to just counting the trees in a forest. We're dealing with the minutiae and the details. What I want you to be able to do is to look up and think about, how do I plan the forest? And then how do I count the trees? So I really hope that you've been able to take away a nugget of information that's going to help you be more effective in your efforts. And I hope that understanding the project management process and the information that I've shared with you today will help you be a little bit more effective as you're planning your projects, and bring you up from just thinking about task management and thinking more holistically about project management. So if you have any questions, I would love for you to join me during the live Q&A. I have this and another session in the summit. That session talks about stopping the habits that block your productivity. And so I would love to hear from you. I'd love to know what your key takeaways are and if there's anything that you are looking forward to putting in place. And as I said, I do have a few things for you as a thank you for the swag bag. And so let me share those gifts with you. I do want you to go get your swag. The first thing I'm going to share with you is that tool that I talked to you about that helps me stay on top of my projects. So it's about racing your projects. And I'll be sharing with you a sheet that you can edit for your own projects and instructions on how you can use it. So this is actually super useful if you are a person that struggles with delegation and following up on your projects, or you struggle with kind of laying out the plan. So I'll just give you a quick snapshot of what the RACI project tracker looks like, but this is a tool that I've learned to use over the years, and it's really made a big difference in how I follow up and follow through on my projects. The next thing that I have for you is a chapter from my book, The Full Plate Detox. And so I will actually be sharing that with you. And the other session that I'm doing when I talk about the habits that can block your productivity is actually pulled from this book. But it's really important, and that first chapter will kind of get you thinking about what's on your plate and what's draining your cup and stealing from your productivity. So you'll be getting that in the swag bag. The next thing that I do have also is a complimentary report about identifying bad productivity habits. And so you'll also get a worksheet that can help you look at any habits. And so our projects go hand in hand. Thinking about the way that you work on your projects and how you approach them will be key. So hopefully you can not only get rid of some of those bad habits or address them, but you'll also be able to think about your projects differently and use the tracker to keep you moving forward. I'll also be signing you up for my popular weekly tip series, where I share with you practical and proven tips to stay on top of your priority list. And those range from things like looking at your habits to just sharing some tips and resources and tools that can keep you productive. So that's a newsletter that'll be coming your way once you sign up for your swag bag gift. And finally, I am inviting you to join me in the next Goals Incubator, which starts on March 29th. It is a 4-week program that's designed for those who like to skip the planning phase. You'll be able to get short, bite-sized trainings, actionable worksheets, live Q&As with me, and a private group for accountability with others. And you'll get to pick my brain as you're working through this. So I'd love for you to join me. And as a part of your thank you, in the swag bag, I'll be giving you a 25% discount off of the Goals Incubator. So again, just a reminder of all the things that I'll be sharing with you in the swag bag. And if you want to get your gift, go on over to tinyurl.com/NCTMTBS21. And you'll be getting your gifts there. Please be sure, all I'm going to ask you to do once you go there is to give me your name and your email address, and then please be sure to check your inbox and your spam filters so that you do not miss your gifts. They'll be coming your way. I just want to say thank you again for joining me in this session. I hope that you've gotten some really good takeaways. I'd love to hear what those are in the live Q&A. Please join me. I look forward to connecting with you there as well as on social media. Have a wonderful rest of the summit.